Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. We are your hosts, Linda and Jim McKissack. If you know our story, you know that we went from over $600,000 in debt to having financial freedom. We share some of the insights and practical tips that we've learned over the last 30 years for achieving financial freedom, building wealth, and building an extraordinary life. Let's get started with today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Jim McKissack.
Hey, Jim, we're back for another episode to talk about financial freedoms and other kind of freedoms and why they're important and why we're just an average couple who wanted extraordinary, average, above average results out of our life. And so if we can do it, other people can too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about the importance of teaching your kids about money and investments. Because I think you and I both came from backgrounds, and we've said this before, but we came from backgrounds where money wasn't talked about. It was scarce.
Right.
And so you got this kind of idea around that money was scarce, but it really wasn't talked about one way or the other, right?
And it's not taught in school at all.
Oh, definitely.
And so, you don't get any kind of financial education about checkbooks, about paying bills, about anything that has to do with money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's got a lot of great books out there about talking to your kids about money, but we're just going to share with you today how we did it and what we did. And I think we've gotten some pretty good results because most of our kids have followed our path and made some great investments and are starting to build their wealth. And they're both, in the two that are doing it are definitely in their 30s.
Right.
Right. So, all right. So let's talk about it first. Number one, I think the point I would add is we talked about it. We talked about money and we talked about investments, and they heard us say it a lot and talk about it a lot.
Yeah. I remember the story with you teaching Press the difference between an asset and a liability.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. We were driving down the road and he wanted to, well, first of all, it started out with, we play the cash flow quadrant game.
Yeah.
So when they were young,
that's Robert Kiyosaki's game from the book, Cash Flow Quadrant.
Yeah. There's a kid's version, Cash Flow Quadrant. We started playing that after we read the book, because that was such a game changer book for us. So we started playing that game with them. And because we'd been playing that game, one day we were driving down the road and Press said, "Mom, stop. And he was pointing to the big wooden playhouses that are out on the side of the road always, and you're always
swings and
the swings, and you're trying to point them, have them look in the other direction. Well, that way I was not on my game, and Press saw it before I could deter him. And he said, "Mom, let's stop. We got to stop. We stop. I want one of those." And I said, "Well, Press, let me ask you a question. Would that be an asset or a liability?" And he said, "Oh man, that would be a liability." And I said, "Well, why would it be a liability?" And he said, "Because it wouldn't make me any money." And so we knew the game had been effective, and he had learned the difference between assets and liabilities. Yeah. So love it. So number one, talk about it in a favorable way. I would say, be careful that you don't talk about scarce, so much about scarce moments in around money, because then they grow up thinking that it's scarce, and we believe it's abundant. We believe that there's more and ample out there for everybody to have.
So
whatever
you got to really
amount.
have that abundance mentality.
Yeah. And to teach them, that money's good for the good it can do, and show them in ways that because you're making money and you're investing and you're doing those things, that you can give back more to people who actually need it.
Yeah. And what you really realize over time is that money has a set of rules. And so following those set of rules on how to save money, how to control your expenses, how to, make money, getting out there and create money, and have money attracted to you.
Yeah.
Those are all important things.
Yeah. And later we're going to talk about some of that in a specific talk that we talk about some of the money rules and disciplines that everyone should know. Right. Also, I think we lived by example. They saw us saving some of our money to put it into investment properties. They saw us going from, honestly, the way our life transgressed up the scale, from our beginning house to where we live now. And they saw the life experiences that we were able to accomplish over time. So I think they saw our life progress. It didn't stay the same or go backwards.
And the quality of life got better as the income grew. And so our latter kids kind of had a little bit better front than our first kids.
Yeah, our first kids. Yeah. And here's the thing. We also taught them that money isn't happiness, and happiness isn't money. Happiness is happiness, right? And
Money's money.
right. And so we should always be happy where we are while we pursue what it is that we want.
Yeah. I
Right.
agree with
You
that.
don't ever want them to think that you're only going to be happy when you have money, or that money's going to make you any happier, because it's just not.
You know, being an investor and stuff and investing in real estate, one of the things that we did and I did is, you know, I took the kids along with me whenever I was out buying foreclosed property and stuff like that. They actually went to the sale with me. They actually drove around in the car with me, watched me evaluate the properties and stuff. And they learned that method. In fact, Press has two investment properties, and Bailey has three investment properties, and both of them came along at times and stuff to the foreclosure sale with me to watch the houses being rehabbed when they met with the contractors with me and
Mhm.
stuff. So they kind of knew what it took. And so, you know, living by example with those is one way to do it. And for me, it was accountability.
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of neat having your kids along and letting them see exactly what you do and stuff. And I remember one time when we went on vacation, trip you and I went on, Bailey actually took over the
The management, or
the rehab.
the rehab. Yeah.
Yeah, and she had to deal with my contractor, which
Yeah.
was a
Which she learned wasn't easy.
yeah.
Yeah. And I remember a time when you were fishing on a fishing trip, which fishing always trumps investing for Jim. That's the only thing that will trump investing, I
Yeah.
think. But you were gone, and Press and I went to look at a house that someone, another investor, called us about. And we went to go look at it, and we bought it. Press and I bought it. And because Press and I both are not real detail people, you're actually the detail person in the group. You called us and said, well, tell me about the property. And neither one of us could remember a darn thing.
Nothing about it. I mean, nothing.
But here's the
But
thing.
it was a great property.
It was a great buy. It was a great buy. So it's kind of fun to, I think, you know, having them along for the experiences and teaching them
Mhm.
is super important. And they may fuss a little. I remember going to work with my dad years ago and tear down construction. And I promise you, I probably whined every single time I had to go with him. But the work ethic and the things that it taught me was just invaluable. And I think if you brought our kids on, which maybe we'll do that someday, let our kids talk about it from their perspective. But if you bring, you know, I think your kids will look back and say, I really value that you did bring me along for those experiences.
I remember Press bought his first rental property at the foreclosure sale, and he was scared to death on that. And he wanted me to bid for him. And I said, I'm not going to bid for you, son. This is your deal. I said, you've got to make your own. What do you think it's too much? You think blah, 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 blah. It turns out that he made a great buy. He and his wife went and rehabbed it, and they did a fabulous job, stayed in budget on their rehab and stuff. And that one property, because they're young, they financed it on a 30-year note. And that property cash flows them $900 a month today, and it's tripled in value.
Yeah, absolutely. So great opportunity to bring your kids along and teach them as you do it. And like Jim said, that'll be a lot more accountability for you because you want to teach them the right way. So yeah, we played cash flow quadrant. We talked about it. And then one thing that I thought about, Jim, that I didn't realize at the time was important, but Press always had a little friend named Nick that was always at our house.
Since Press was three years old.
He's been Press's friend since he was 3. And now Nick, in one avenue that we'll talk about later that we have for building wealth, Nick makes about $50,000 a year passively.
Mhm.
And he's also, do you know how many investment properties he has?
3 or 4 now.
3 or 4 investment properties. And so he was also along when we were talking about
he
all
was
this
the rich kid, rich dad, poor dad.
example.
I mean, it's exactly that example. If you've read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he was that kid in the block that kind of grew up with Press and always asked great questions and stuff. And I mean, just a great kid.
Well, and I think what the benefit of Nick being along with Press was it made Press, because, you know, our kids don't do what we tell them. They do what they self-discover. And I think when Nick thought it was so cool, it made it really cool to Press too, right? And I think sometimes if somebody else appreciate what your parents do, you might not always appreciate it, but if someone else appreciates it, you would see the value a little bit more. And then I would go downstairs sometimes in our strategy room, and I would see them writing on the whiteboard all the ways they were going to build wealth and do investments. So it really kind of became a real cool bond between Nick and Press, that they were both going to grow up and apply these principles.
The other thing that we did is we paid our kids to read books.
Yes. Oh, good point. I forgot about that one. Yes. Yes, we paid them to read books, and we always told them that we were teaching a class or doing something, and would you read this book and kind of tell me what you think? Because I think the more you can get, good stuff into your kid's mind, then the better, more is going to come out later, right?
And the other thing that you and I were really blessed with some great mentors.
Yeah.
And so taking our kids with us to those real estate conventions that you thought were vacations and I thought were real estate conventions, those are powerful. Those kids went there, they built relationships with the other kids, with their parents were there and stuff. And it was a neat time because they were learning with us.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that one, but yeah, they went on many a real estate conference trip with us. So I think that helped them learn the importance of being learning based also. And then one thing that we're doing now, because now we have grandkids, is we're doing Mimi and Pop Pop Camp. And we're starting earlier than we actually started with our own kids. Yeah.
What was the name of the book that the guy wrote that we read about that?
Oh, gosh, good question. We'll find that book because we actually met a guy at our strategic coaching program that we do. And he had just written a book about how to do a Mimi and Pop Pop Camp. And one of my mentors, Mo Anderson, had a friend out of Cincinnati that she had always done a Mimi and Pop Pop Camp. And so I heard it kind of, it's one of those things where that idea comes to you a couple of times. You're like, man, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And by the way, you could do this with your kids if they're even now. You don't have to wait for Mimi and Pop Pop Camp. Yeah. We wish we had known it when our kids were little. We would have started Mommy and Daddy Camp or something early.
Yeah. Tell them about it. Let's talk about the first time we did that. What does that camp look like?
Yeah. So, this will be a whole new episode.
We went out to that morning for breakfast. We took the kids out, our two granddaughters out to breakfast at IHOP.
Yeah.
And we didn't do anything but give them the history of each one of our families.
Yeah.
So they're great grandparents and grandparents.
Yeah, because a good point on this, Jim, is your kids got to see your life progress, but your grandkids only see it with this big house that we have, a plane that we have, fun vacations we take them on. They don't get to see the beginning days. So, and I just read this in a book the other day. I think it was called Win the Day by Mark Batterson, a pastor out of Maryland. And it was such a good point that you should always tell your kids and your grandkids your history. And so that's what we did. We told them what we came from and that we were on, it wasn't food stamps back then, but we were on commodities. So that means someone provided food for us. That teaches them two things. One, how far you can come in life if you set your mind to it. And number two, that when you have money to give back so that you can give a leg up for other people that were like us when we were young and little.
Yeah. And then we took them back to our office, to what we call our strategy room, where we work with different business people in this room. And we're sitting at a long table and they're sitting there, and we taught them about money. We had some really good discussions on money, taught them some about goal setting, taught them, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we taught them one of the first things we taught them about is the compounding effect of money. When you put only $100 away a month. And our oldest granddaughter's biggest aha was, oh my gosh, if I did that, I could buy a house someday.
Yeah.
So that was a great correlation that she had. So I think, as we look
then we brought them back after that, came back to our house. We had them cook us dinner.
Yes.
They cooked us dinner. They set the table, they set the plates, and our daughter-in-law taught them cotillion or whatever.
Yeah, where the knives, the stuff you and I still don't even know, like where do the knives go, where the forks go, and which one do you get first? I mean, all that good stuff. So that was fun.
And then they made dessert, and then they did the dishes when we got through.
Yeah.
But it was a neat day, and they all had a blast, and we graduated them from first Mimi Pop camp.
Hello, thank you for listening to the Everything Life and Financial Freedom podcast. For transcripts, resources, and more, visit the episode page on the podcast website at everythinglifeandfinancialfreedom.com. You can also download our Freedom Number worksheet. This worksheet will help you determine the amount of passive income you need to generate each year to sustain the lifestyle you have or the lifestyle you want when you no longer wish to work or simply want the freedom of your time and your money. And when I think, what are the benefits of teaching your kids and your grandkids about money and investing is, I think you and I made the mistake. We did a lot of things right, and we're not perfect, and we've made mistakes. But I think one of the things that we learned after our kids were grown is that don't try to make your kids' lives easy. In other words, teach them understand the work ethic, because that's the one thing you and I both had. We both started getting jobs probably at 14, as fast as we could. I remember my sister had to sign for me to get a job, but I wanted my own money because I didn't have any money growing up. And so because your kids and your grandkids probably don't live in those same situations, to let them know right now, number one, work ethic is going to be super important.
And one of the key things that most people always do is they always want their kids to have a better situation than you had. And what you're really doing sometimes is cheating those kids out of getting those lessons, because, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. And so, being knocked down and being able to get back up really fast, we've been able to do that most of our life. And it's because a lot of those early lessons that we had to do through the hardships.
Yeah. And I think about, if you and I had known some of this stuff, that first financial crash that we went through, we might have been in a different position, because we didn't know that life could hand you something and gradually and suddenly your life could shift,
Well, we were never on a wealth building journey.
Right. But had we known this, had our parents known this and taught us this earlier, we could have probably, saved ourselves a little bit of grief. Not that I would trade it for anything, because we wouldn't, but so if I look at this and I say, why is it important to teach your kids about money and investing? It's because I just think we cannot, moving forward. And I think a business psychotherapist told us this: you need multiple streams of income. You need backup plans in life. And even if you don't ever need that backup plan, all that money can go to good things like giving to something that's important to you, helping someone in your family, all kinds of great things. So I think you certainly don't have anything to lose if you teach it to them, but you do have some things that they could lose if you don't teach it to them.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that just building that abundant life and that life of freedom is just so important. I think it starts with the principles, and a lot of them are just the basics, like Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. That was really a good book. Press read that also.
Yeah. And by the way, you may have kids who you were not able to teach these things to. I know we certainly do too. And, you may have to start with them with one of Dave Ramsey's book on Total Money Makeover or things like that. And I think there's some probably even great books. We'll look and see what we can find and put them in the show notes. But I think there's some great books out there that specifically go towards teaching your kids certain principles in money. And I know later we're going to talk on an episode about money.
The Wealthy Barber is kind of a kid's book. And the book Dream Giver, that was a cool book. It's not just about money, but it's about abundance and having a big life.
Well, I think Dream Giver is by Jeff Wilkerson, and you can get it. It's a parable, and you can get it on an audio, and we'll start letting your kids listen to it pretty young. And what it teaches them is that when you have big goals in life, you're going to be different than a lot of people, and you're going to have naysayers, and those naysayers are going to want to talk you out of those dreams.
And a lot of those naysayers can be your family.
Could be your family or your friends. And that with God's help and with you looking to him and not looking to what everybody else is saying, there really is an opportunity to go after your dreams, but be prepared for all the naysayers that are there. That's a great one. There's so many great books that are geared towards teaching kids, just certain principles and things.
Yeah, I remember Dream Giver. We did it with Press. We were driving down to Austin or something. I think we were listening to it as a tape over the radio.
Yeah, it's a great one. We've even already we've got that one. Another one that we did with Mimi and Pop Up. We've done our second annual Mimi and Pop Up camp, and this year, the book that we actually went through with them while we had them for the day was The Giving Jar.
Mhm.
And so again, we don't want to ever overemphasize to our kids that everything is only about making money. It's what good can money do if you do have it and you do have
Yeah.
extra.
So we also gave them a giving jars.
We each gave them a
Yeah.
giving jar. We'll see what happens this year when we go back to them and see how well they've done with their giving jar. Right? We're not really sure how those results are going to play out, but we'll certainly see. So, any final thoughts, Jimmy, about teaching your kids about money and investing? One thing I would add is don't make it lean one way or the other, because you mentioned Wealthy Barber, and Wealthy Barber really is about a person who I wouldn't call it necessarily a job, but it kind of was a job, because when he stopped, so did it. But when your kids have jobs, you don't want them to think that the only people that get wealthy are the people that have 100% commission, because I think that's a mistake we made. And so our kids grew up thinking, well, if I can't be an entrepreneur, then I can't be wealthy. And so that is not the case at all. There's many books and many stories out there of people who had jobs that they loved, and they just took the extra money and used it to invest and create wealth. So that's the one thing I would be careful of, is because we have one daughter that she really felt like she's more of a creative. And so she really felt like she couldn't do the things that we were talking about, because all we ever talked about was being an entrepreneur and owning a business and all that stuff. Now, here's the interesting thing. She's already a millionaire, because our son-in-law, when Jimmy talked earlier about our kids going with him to the foreclosure step, our son-in-law, when they were first married, went to the foreclosure steps with Jimmy. And when he got sick with cancer, he knew that he would leave his wife and daughter, and he didn't want to leave them in bad shape. He wanted to take care of them. So he applied those principles and bought how many houses? 3 houses.
He paid for 3 houses. Well, he paid for 2, and halfway paid for another one in the 10 months that he lived.
Yeah. So there was a blessing, honestly, that we weren't even prepared for, that our son-in-law would learn and be able to use it as something that was super important to him as he was dying of cancer, is that I take care of my family. I don't leave my family for you or my parents to have to do anything. I'm going to have done it. And it's funny, because we just had a conversation with our daughter Bailey on one of the houses, the one that's not paid off. And she was thinking about refinancing it so she could work on this other deal for passive income. And when she looked it up, it was a year or less to pay off. She changed her whole mind about refinancing that house.
Absolutely, because if she refinanced it, she'd be starting all over with the high interest on the front end and stuff. So right now, all of her payments are going towards the principal, just about. Yeah. For a little bit on the interest.
Yeah. So great conversation about why you should teach your kids. And of course, this is our angle. This is our story. This is our way that we did it. We're not 100% accurate on everything, but it worked for us. And so hopefully you got some ideas today that you can share, and you can see why it would be important to, even if you're just beginning in this journey, take your kids along with you and let them see, what you had to learn and what you have to do to figure out financial freedom. Thanks for listening today. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with others. The greatest compliment you can give us is to leave a 5-star review, and please feel free to reach out to us at info@lindamckissack.com. We would love to hear from you about any ideas, topics, or guests to include on our podcast. So see you next time.